Hello and welcome to another cold case. Today, we are taking you back to the 1970s. A man called Norman Oliver sits alone in his study. He is the editor of the Journal of the British UFO Research Association. He's used to getting reports of objects half glimpsed in the sky. But this letter is different. It was a truly unbelievable encounter, the letter writer says. I believe that my daughter was telling the truth. Norman turns the page, and a drawing of a truly weird figure stares back at him. Something about the figure makes him uneasy. What the hell has this child seen? We are about to find out, because today's case is without a doubt the most bizarre that we have investigated on Uncanny. Can we explain it? Let's see, because things are about to get very weird and deeply creepy. I'm Danny Robbins, and this is Uncanny Cold Cases.
What has passed comes again in the cold where we lay. Secrets still remain. Secrets still remain.
Welcome back. Thank you for all of your comments, questions and theories on this new series. I'm loving all of these interactions. We've talked about hauntings and UFOs so far, but today's case is neither. Or maybe it is both. You tell me. It is a truly strange one. It might not be so well known, but it's got a real cult reputation amongst those who study the paranormal. To discuss it, I am joined as ever by the paranormal Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. You can argue about which is which. Writer and parapsychologist Evelyn Hollow, and forensic psychologist and hardcore skeptic Dr. Kieran O'Keefe. Evan, it's a case that defies easy categorization, isn't it? I mean, spoiler alert here, things are going to get really bizarre.
It is. I think it's arguably the weirdest case that we've ever worked on. We normally work in terms of ghosts, UFOs, possibly even monsters or cryptids. This has a little bit of everything all at the same time, and yet it is like no other case we've ever had.
And Kieran, it takes place on the Isle of Wight. Great location.
Yes, great location. And for, the UK audience here, they will be very familiar with Isle of Wight. But it is an island, so we could start arguing about the psychology of, being separated from the mainland. But also there are parts of the island that almost feel like they're stuck in time.
Okay, well, let us make the journey across the water, but also back in time as we bring the details of this strange case to life. It is a Tuesday afternoon, drifting into early evening, in the village of Lake in Sandown on the Isle of Wight. 7-year-old Faye, small for her age and red-haired, is roaming the edges of the village common with her friend Mark when their chatter is broken by a piercing mechanical wail. The children stop playing. It's not an ambulance, it's not anything they've heard before. The sound rises again, closer this time. They follow the noise across a golf course and push through a hedge into a desolate, marshy stretch of land near Sandown Airport. The place feels gloomy and the temperature is dropping, but curiosity pulls them onwards. And then the noise stops. Ahead lies a narrow wooden bridge spanning a stream. Beyond it, the path thickens into a tangle of reeds. It's the kind of place where grown-ups warn children not to go. They hesitate, turn back, or go on. Faye steps onto the bridge. And then a hand reaches up from the water. Bizarre and frightening enough in itself, but even worse, this is a blue, 3-fingered hand. It grabs the edge of the wooden bridge. Faye gasps, and it gets worse. The hand is followed by an arm, and then a figure heaves itself from the dark water. It is enormous, nearly 7 feet tall and grotesquely strange. On its head is a yellow pointed hat, antennae jutting from either side. Its face is a geometry lesson gone wrong. Triangular eyes, a square nose, unmoving yellow lips, and it has no neck at all. Its head seems fused directly to its shoulders. An adult would turn and run in horror, but Faye and Mark remain rooted to the spot, fascinated as the weird creature splashes about, searching for something beneath the surface. At last, It rises, dripping, holding what appears to be a book in its three-fingered hand. Task complete, it lumbers out of the stream. Its gait is bizarre. High, exaggerated hops, knees lifting like a cartoon character brought horribly to life. The children do not know what to make of the creature's odd display. They trail it from a distance as it walks off, following as it approaches a metallic hut, half hidden among the reeds. The creature opens a flap in the hut and disappears inside. Faye and Mark wait in expectation for a few moments before the flap opens again and the figure emerges holding what appears to be a microphone. That wailing siren erupts once more, louder than before. Faye clamps her hands over her ears and Mark turns to run, but then the sound cuts off abruptly and the creature speaks into the device. "Hello," it says. "Are you still there?" Faye and Mark cautiously edge closer. The creature, as if sensing their fear, tries a gentler approach. It produces a notebook and scribbles large, clumsy words across the pages. It points at each word in turn, and Mark reads slowly. "Hello, I am all colors Sam." All colors Sam. Kieran, where on earth do we start with this one? I mean, I cannot think of another case that even comes close to this with bizarreness.
No, it is very, very bizarre, and there are elements of it that I have not seen in any other case.
This is kids we're talking about here. Faye and Mark are pseudonyms for them to protect their identity. But, you know, there's a tendency, isn't there, Evelyn, to dismiss children, to say they have flights of fancy, imagination, imaginary friends. But the reason this case has stood the test of time is because there are a lot of paranormal experts out there who absolutely feel that these kids are speaking the truth. Why is that?
So I think when we deal with kids, the first thing you go to is, oh, imaginary friend. However, it wouldn't be the first time that kids have witnessed something like this. So you had Broadhaven, where more than a dozen children saw a cigar-shaped craft. Then you've also got Ruwa in Zimbabwe, where I think more than 50, even 60 children saw a craft that they couldn't identify. And so it's not uncommon. It's not just adults that see things. Kids do see them too.
Well, there's an argument, I think, actually, in some circles, that these things are appearing to children for a reason, that children are more open-minded, potentially.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of potentially spiritualist belief that kids are not, they're not corrupted by the world yet or anything, and so they're more open to paranormal phenomena. Another perhaps biological or neurological argument that augments that is that kids' sense of hearing and sight is different to ours.
It's interesting. Kids are so more sensitive and receptive to the world than we are. I remember really distinctly having a party for kids, a birthday party, and my son could tell his friends' jackets by picking them up and smelling them. Should we listen to children, Kieran? Are we too quick to dismiss them? In this case, do we need to trust Mark and Faye?
I think we need to be careful in trusting children, and my children, if they're watching this, will be horrified at me saying that. But, look at the Cottingley fairies. Here was a case over a century ago where two young girls, they even had photographs of fairies at the bottom of their garden.
This was such a famous case, wasn't it? And people can look this up on the internet now. You can see these photographs of what seemed to be fairies with these children leaning in close to them. It became a huge sensation.
It was a huge sensation, and it was investigated by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. He was an individual that was also interested in the paranormal. He investigated seances, and he ended up investigating the Cottingley fairies and believed without a shadow of a doubt in everything that these two girls were saying.
He staked his reputation on it, didn't he? He came out publicly in the newspapers and said, these girls are telling the truth. These fairies are real.
Absolutely. And if we look back at the fairies now, we look back at those photographs, you just look at them and they're almost laughable. It's quite obvious that they're fake. But he was drawn in by these two young girls and effectively believed everything they said. So we've got to treat their testimony with a little bit of care.
The girls in that case came out eventually as old women and admitted they'd been faking it, didn't they? But if this is a fake, though, it's hard to work out why the children would be doing it. They're not really getting anything out of it at all. And what they're describing is so vivid in detail, so kind of almost forensically crisp.
Yeah, it's the description that really, really gets me, because there's lots of really unusual nuance in it. When it tries to communicate, they have to write certain things down and point to it as if it doesn't understand, as if it comes from somewhere else or it's illiterate. Why does it use this thing that looks like a microphone? There's just so many bizarre things. If it is a person, why isn't it just speaking to them normally? And if it's an imaginary friend, again, why are they conjuring up sort of speech impediments or problems? It's just really, really bizarre.
I am all colours Sam. Such a creepy, unsettling phrase. What does it mean? Why does it scare us?
The reason why it feels unsettling is because there's no framework to put it in. As humans, we have to categorise everything. I have to be able to say, that's a ghost, and a ghost was once a living person who's now dead. It's an alien, it comes from a different planet, etc. There's nothing when I point here. There's nothing. What is all colour Sam?
Okay, bizarre, creepy, totally outside our normal paranormal comfort zone. This case is all of those things. I'd love to know what you're making of it so far, but be prepared, because it's about to get even stranger. So let us jump back to Sandown on the Isle of Wight in 1973, where we left All Colours Sam, this strange figure, attempting to communicate with Faye and Mark. "Are you a man?" asks Faye. All Colours Sam emits a dry, rasping sound that might be a laugh and hesitantly attempts to speak. "No," he says. "Are you a ghost then?" "Not really," he says. Something about his face is weird. His lips don't move when he speaks. "But I am, in an odd sort of way." The kids feel a little more unsettled now. "What are you?" Mark asks. "You know," Sam replies cryptically. He tells them that there are others like him, and that he is scared of people. He invites Faye and Mark inside the metal hut. They crawl through the flat and find themselves in a space that makes no sense. It's on 2 levels. The lower room is papered in blue-green patterns like old radio dials. A small heater glows. Simple wooden furniture sits neatly arranged. Above them is a metallic upper level with no stairs, no ladder, no door. Sam explains in his halting, peculiar way that he lives on berries that he gathers in the late afternoon. He says that he's a camp on the mainland and that he can drink river water once he has cleaned it. Then he performs a trick. He puts a berry into his ear and then jerks his head forward, and the berry vanishes and reappears behind one of his eyes. Another jerk, and the berry drops into his mouth. The children are entranced by this weird display. They stay and talk to Sam for a while longer, then say goodbye and run home across the golf course full of excitement at their encounter with this strange new friend. Faye tells her dad what they witnessed. Now, her dad is a chartered engineer, a highly qualified professional, used to getting to the bottom of complex problems. He properly interrogates Faye about her encounter, writing her answers down in forensic detail. He asks Faye to draw a picture of All Colours Sam. Then separately, he gets Mark to do the same thing. Their stories and their pictures are eerily similar. And there's something else that unsettles Faye's dad. Because what the children are describing feels horribly familiar to him. He has had his own encounters in this area of the Isle of Wight, things that he has never told Faye about. And to him, what the children are describing actually doesn't sound impossible at all. Blimey, just when you thought that this story couldn't get any weirder, it absolutely does. What do you feel we are looking at, Evelyn?
So the first thing that's odd is that if we are making an assumption that this was a person, perhaps, and that for whatever reason they were dressed up, whether that was sort of malicious or not, then it doesn't explain things like having missing fingers. The height is obviously not impossible, but is unusual. But then it does do very strange things that make it seem like it can't be a person. And beyond just the figure itself, it's also the hut that it lives in appears to defy physics, basically. It's a very strange space.
It's like the TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside.
It is. It's got an upstairs, it's got a downstairs. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, spaces feel bigger to children when they go in. It's not like they were in there with a tape measure checking the heights of the doors and things like that. But we have to assume that it was significant enough that it should have been seen by other people, or it should have left some sort of impression in the ground or in the grass. There should be some sort of remnant of it.
Interestingly, it's not seen by other people. They talk about there being a group of workmen in a hut nearby who do not see this giant 7-foot figure.
they don't see it. But then again, is that, a perfect support for a skeptical argument that it is their imagination?
Normally at this point you would have leapt in and said imaginary friends. You haven't yet. Why not?
I think it's partly because of my research into imaginary friends. Typically you would be dealing with a scenario where you would have repeatable occurrences. You'd have a number of interactions, sometimes even daily, but definitely on a weekly basis. But it's a single incident. That is not something that lends itself to the idea that it's imaginary friends. But also, the majority of cases, an imaginary friend is human, either a child or a teenager or an adult. In a smaller number of cases, it'll be something else, but it'll be something that's identifiable. A talking animal, like a bear or even a dog on its hind legs, but talking or playing with the child. Now that's imaginary friends. You don't get those situations where the imaginary friend is completely distorted and unidentifiable. And that's what I think is very, very weird about this. It's almost like I'm stepping into Evelyn's camp, but I really want to make a point here. It feels as though we can discount the possibility straight away that we're dealing with an imaginary friend.
Could it be an actual clown?
I mean, it's a possibility. So if we look at this as being an actual person, first of all, they're at least 7 foot tall. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's an odd detail on the Isle of Wight. And the thing is, how the clown first appears to them also kind of discounts it being a person, because it's beneath the water and then appears to climb out of it. I mean, it's fully submerged. So if it is in some sort of mask or sort of robotic suit or something like that, how would that be possible? And why is there a 7 foot tall clown holding its breath underwater on the Isle of Wight and then coming out with 3 fingers to talk to children? Just like even saying it out loud, it sounds more and more fantastical. And also it did those sort of weird tricks where it was putting berries through its
so
face.
weird.
Like...
Kieran, as a skeptic, talk me through this one. How do you do that? How do you put a berry into your ear and have it appear behind your eye?
Oh yeah, but that's a magic trick. That doesn't have to be something supernatural for you to be able to do that. There are magicians all over the world that can do that with larger objects
I have
than berries.
never seen David Blaine push a berry behind his eye.
Well, he would never
To
do
be
that.
honest, I'd love to. That would be great. It'd be much better than sitting up the top of a crane in a box.
But he could do that with a card. He could do that with a pack of cards and fool you. So we've got the potential that we do have some sort of weird clown. I'll grant you that. It's a pretty weird clown that they're describing. But it's quite possible that we are dealing with a clown.
All right, thank you both. What do you make of this one so far? Are you team believer or team skeptic? But we need to talk about Faye's dad right now, because he is going to be a really significant character for us going forward in this case. So let's hear what happened to him. For that, we're going to have to head back to nearly 3 years before Faye's encounter with Sam. It's October 1970, early evening. Faye's dad is driving north through the country lanes of the Isle of Wight as he heads out to visit a friend. He's just passed through the town of Brading when something catches his eye. Some kind of aircraft dotted with lights, moving low over the fields to his right. He slows down, watching as the thing drifts above the marshy edges of the River Yar. A helicopter, perhaps? But no, this is silent. It hangs in the air, its perimeter marked by a ring of red lights. He drives on slowly. The object keeps pace, as though observing him in return. They travel together through the quiet village of St. Helens until the craft suddenly sweeps behind him and drops out of sight. Faye's dad pulls over, steps out and flashes his torch across a nearby field. The lights reappear, weaving back and forth, but never getting closer. Eventually, he gets back into the car and continues on, the red lights trailing him. When he reaches his friend's house, he tries to laugh it off. "I'm being followed by a Martian craft," he jokes. And his friend comes outside to take a look. Together, they watch the lights flicker among the treetops, darting in and out of view as though playing a game. Later, driving on towards Ryde, he finally loses sight of the lights, but the encounter doesn't end there. Over the following weeks and months and years, Faye's dad sees the lights on multiple occasions, always distant, always watchful. In February 1972, they lead him all the way to Compton Bay on the island's southwest coast. Standing on a dark shore, he tries again to communicate, sweeping his torch across the waves. The lights keep their distance. A few weeks later, though, he is swimming in that same bay when a sudden, unnatural surge forces him towards the cliffs. As he clings to the rock, he looks down into the churning water and sees glowing yellow lights staring up from beneath the surface like eyes rising from the deep. Terror grips him. He scrambles out of the water and flees. Kieran, do you think that what's happened to Faye's dad in the past, his UFO experiences, has a bearing on our case? He swears that he didn't tell Faye anything about those experiences.
Yeah, I think we've got to consider that there might be some influence there. I mean, you know, if we take what he says as face value and he didn't influence the children in any way, then it's great. You know, we've got a really interesting case. But the only problem would be, have the children heard him talk about his experiences or heard him talk about his interest in UFOs inadvertently? We've got to consider it as an influence in some way.
It feels like, from what we're hearing from his experiences, that the Isle of Wight's a bit of a UFO hotspot. You've been looking into some of the UFO history there.
Yeah, so basically there's a spate of Isle of Wight UFO sightings in the mid-1970s, not just Faye's dad. They're all reported in the local press. So in the November of 1970, a woman saw a strange object with glowing light and it was hovering over Sandown airport. Then in December of the following year, a farmer called Tom Reynolds was out herding his cows when he saw a long silvery object in the sky trailing sparks. Another woman, Mrs. Dovell, was out walking her dog the same night and she saw the exact same object from a different location. And then in July of 1975, a couple, Gus and Muriel Langford, they saw a massive green object flash across the sky, again near Sandown Airport. And then in early 1976, we have a sighting of a strange craft in the sky, which was confirmed by the Met Office. And it was subject to a Ministry of Defence inquiry, so that's quite serious. And then a couple of months later, in April of 1976, former Royal Navy officer David Spencer, a man who's familiar with lots of types of aircraft, saw a dark spherical object with red lights over a ride on the north coast of the Isle of Wight. The object is also sighted separately by a woman called Patricia Hutchings, Ray Riddett, and a third person called Nigel Groves, all with matching descriptions.
Could it be a UFO?
It could be a UFO. And in fact, there's a case in Russia, the Voronezh aliens, where a group of children saw an individual that they describe, and there are some similarities here. The fact that the individual they saw was very, very tall, it was dressed in a silver-type jumpsuit, and okay, it had 3 eyes, but it performed magic tricks for them before it then went off into the craft that the children described as a metallic hut. So there are similarities there. So maybe there's some sort of precedent.
And it's Faye's dad's experiences that leads him to send his letter to Bufora, to the UFO research group, describing what he and Faye saw. And that's why we know now about the Sandown Clown.
Yes, and it's lovely that we have that report. And yet, you know, we're hearing that almost secondary, even though it's a report submitted to Bufora. I would love to be in a situation where we're able to get, you know, a direct witness account from Faye. You know, that would be amazing if she was sat in front of us and we were able to talk to her about her original experience and get more detail.
Well, I have an answer for you on that, because there is a very strange postscript to this story. We did speak to Faye. Now, up till now, she has never spoken publicly about her encounter with the Sandown Clown. But we spoke to her a few weeks ago. We can't say how we tracked her down, but she is alive and well, and she's still living on the Isle of Wight. And the reason that she has never spoken about her encounter is a simple one. She no longer remembers it for a very particular and sad reason. According to Faye, life moved on normally for a few years after the incident. She was far more interested in horses than clowns, and her father bought her a horse a few years later. In 1981, whilst out riding, she was thrown from the horse. In the fall, the animal came down on her head. The resulting injuries were life-changing. When Faye woke in hospital, she had lost all memory of her life before the age of 15. Childhood events, family holidays, friendships, every formative experience had been erased. The aftermath reshaped her family life. Faye's father struggled to accept the sudden disappearance of the daughter that he knew, and the two eventually became estranged. They had not spoken for years by the time that he died, only a short while ago. As for the Sandown Clown, Faye retains only the faintest impression of the marshland where the event occurred. She knows that something happened there, but the details have gone. She can't even remember the friend she was with that day, Mark. That leaves the Bufora case files and a handful of newspaper reports as the only surviving sources. With Faye's memory lost to injury, the mystery of the Sandown clown will perhaps sadly remain that forever. A mystery. Kieran, what did Faye and Mark encounter that day on the Isle of Wight?
The Sandown clown. I think potentially that's what they encountered. And we know there were carnivals on the Isle of Wight and potentially they could have seen a clown. Why did the workmen not see anything or not react to that particular figure? Maybe because it was a figure that was just meant to be there. They weren't intrigued by it at all, like the children were. So I think we've got to consider that is the possibility. And in my mind, it's the strongest sceptical argument for what they saw.
Evelyn, do you agree?
I think the weirdest bit for me is when they ask it if it's a ghost. And it says no, but well, sort of. Why did they even think it's a ghost in the first place? Because it's tangible, it's real, it's right there. It doesn't fit any type of haunting phenomena. Why wouldn't they ask it, did you work at the carnival? Were you at the carnival recently? Why wouldn't they ask it, are you an alien? Why did they specifically ask, are you a ghost? And to me, the answer is really bizarre, whether it's conjured from the minds of children or whether it was a person or whether it was something third entirely. It sort of alludes to time. The concept of time. Do you know, what is a ghost but something out of time? And what the kids saw was something that feels out of place and out of time. It's a really unusual case. I have never worked on a case that's even anything like this before. This is totally new territory for me.
All right, thank you both, and thank you also to all of you listening for sharing this remarkably weird story of us. A story that has become a cult classic in the annals of paranormal history. But what do you make of it? Are you team skeptic, team believer, or team WT, the actual F is going on? What would you have done if you had encountered All Colours Sam climbing out of the water that day, reaching his little three-fingered blue hand towards you? If you've got a theory, question, or an idea for a cold case that you would like us to investigate, don't keep it to yourself. Get in touch. You can email me uncanny@bbc.co.uk or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. And also don't forget that you can watch this episode as well. All the episodes in the series are on our brand new Uncanny YouTube channel. Next time though, on Uncanny Cold Cases, it will be bloody chilling as we head for the high seas and an eerie apparition on board a Royal Navy vessel.
You can explain away noises. You can explain away the men telling themselves ghost stories, being frightened. It's very hard to explain away lying in bed and feeling something physically touch you.
You know, here he is, a real hardcore skeptic, and suddenly now he's in a scenario where he just cannot explain it.
See you next time. Uncanny Cold Cases was presented by me, Danny Robbins, with Evelyn Hollow and Kieran O'Keefe. Our theme tune is by Catherine Priddy. The story sections were written by Simon Barnard, and it was produced by Simon Barnard and Victoria Lloyd. Our editor and sound designer is Charlie Brandon King, and incidental music is composed by Evelyn Sykes. This is a Bafflegab and Uncanny media production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Secrets still remain.
Hello, wicked wunderkins and degenerate do-gooders. It's Russell Kane here, host of Evil Genius, the show that takes famous faces from history and knocks them off their high horse by revealing